If you're coming across this video for the first time, I go by the name of PhantomOfDarkness on YouTube. I'm mostly known for my ghost story narrations, but in this video, I'm going to be telling you my life story. It's nothing monumentally spectacular, and in a lot of ways, I'm very fortunate to have been spared a great deal of adversity. To be frank, I'm reluctant when it comes to opening up and expressing myself in such a way that enables me to be so vulnerable. I don't have a propensity to talk about myself in great length, and I'm not a fan of attention. Sure, I enjoy reverie and want to be appreciated for my efforts, and who the heck doesn't want a legion of supporters to be there for you as you go on your existential journey of self-discovery and the evolution of growth. But the last thing I want to do is to talk about me. However, I'll be opening up the metaphorical window, and for the very first time, you will get a brief glimpse into the trials and tribulations of Phantom's journey. Now that I've got your attention though, I'm going to stop becoming articulate and get on with the story. Here goes. Narrate my life. I was born to a mother and father in 1991. They immigrated from Poland to the United States to seek refuge from communist authority. If you're unfamiliar with the country of Poland, it's a massive sovereign state in Central Europe. It shares a border with Germany to the west, and it's a very underrated destination for tourist travel. It's an old country, steeped with tons of history, as well as some terrible moments in its nation's history. Today, Poland's economy is thriving and has had the most economic growth of any European country in the past 30 years. But it wasn't always this way. As I've mentioned, my parents grew up during the era before Poland obtained its sovereignty. In fact, in the 1980s, Poland was filled with political turmoil and hostility. During this time, my parents were fighting for their freedom and were jailed as a result of it. They joined a movement for Polish democracy called Polish Movement of Solidarity. Think along the lines of the civil rights movement in America in the 1960s. My parents literally marched on the streets with a group of Polish folk in order to rid the country of communist rule. Afterwards, they were both thrown in jail, and my dad received advice from a friend who was also part of this movement, who advised him to leave the country to seek a better life. So my parents did just that. They took a huge risk, sacrificing a great deal, leaving their entire family, getting out of their comfort zone, not knowing the English language, to venture out into completely unfamiliar territory. It was a scary world to them, but anything was better than the alternative of staying in a country that oppresses their own people. So, they began their journey. They took my two oldest brothers, and they left the country in 1988 with absolutely nothing to their name but the skin on their backs. They thought about other destinations like England, Baltimore, Maryland, even Chicago, but ultimately ended up in Detroit, Michigan. Could you even imagine Phantom being a British narrator? It's amazing that one little change could have hugely impacted my life and could have turned out entirely different. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if my parents stayed in Poland or had went to a different region in the United States. What type of person would I have been? Would I even have been on YouTube? All these events made me who I am. This video wasn't intended to bore you with unnecessary history, but I think it's important to go back and identify the sequences of events before I was born that led to the person I am today. So, fast forward to a couple years later, and Phantom is born. At that point, we had moved to Ann Arbor, Michigan. I was the fourth and last brother born. My sister came later, in 1997, but right now, it's Phantom's life story. The best way to describe Ann Arbor is that it consists of young business professionals and university students, college-educated intellectuals. The university is responsible for most of the employment of its residents, and its economy depends on the university to succeed. The place sounds great, but if you don't have a lot of money, it can be a very depressing place to live. My parents were being thrown into this world with virtually no English-speaking ability, but they tried their best to learn, and they did. My mom would spend countless hours sitting in the kitchen, opening up a dictionary, and learning every word in the entire English language by herself. She spent so much time not working taking care of the kids, while my dad worked 60 to 70 hours a week in the auto body shop on minimum wage, just so we could all survive paycheck to paycheck. Really puts things into perspective. All I do is sit and read stories and have a life that was paid for me because of my parents. It was a very difficult period in their life. We didn't really have any family to lean on, like a grandmother or uncles, cousins, etc. All we had was one paycheck and 5 kids. I remember so many days where I would hardly even eat that I really had to learn the meaning of truly sharing. I remember being in preschool. We had one big green van, and my mom eventually started working at the same preschool I attended. That van would constantly break down, and we would have to use the public buses. Actually, I vividly remember a time in which we drove across town to visit a family friend of ours. It was me, my dad, my mom, and my sister. We drove that green van to their house one day. There was no answer, and they weren't home. My dad starts the car up again, but it breaks down. With nobody to call and no one to rely on, we had to walk all the way back home, across town. It took us about 3 hours. Unfortunately, it was a Sunday, and the buses didn't run on a Sunday. Anyway, Mom would drag my hand, and we would literally race as fast as we could every day, just so we could make the bus on time. I was so exhausted, being a 4-year-old kid, and I just wanted to go home ASAP. My mom was so tired of doing this. She wanted a better life for her kids and herself, so she decided that she would go to university. She was tired of not being able to eat, the fierce competition of the city, and all the misfortunes of being below the poverty line. Going to university seemed like it was the only way to improve the quality of life. So, the years went on. We were so broke that I only received candy bars for Christmas every year. Sometimes, I'd get cheap toys from the thrift shop that would break every so often, but we really didn't get much. My mom used to tell us that, as long as we had each other and our health, that's all that mattered. Of course, as a young kid, I was devastated. I remember crying because I couldn't get certain gifts. My classmates at school would brag about how they went on vacation and had all these amazing toys, but me, I lied so I could fit in and be like the kids at school. I didn't have any of that. Eventually, I grew up and entered middle school. Things almost seemed like they were turning out great for us. My mom and dad were both working better jobs. Dad had graduated college, and he got the best paying job he's ever had at the local newspaper. It was only a part-time position, but he was still getting a middle-class salary. Meanwhile, for me in my adolescent years, things were not going so well. I was a very outgoing kid in elementary school, had tons of friends, but as I grew older into my teens, I became more reserved and shy. I ended up losing all my friends, and I wouldn't leave my house. I became that weird kid who used to be funny, but got weird and quiet. I felt so low. Rejection was at every corner, so unsure of myself and who I was, and I turned to video games to cope with these difficulties. I learned a valuable lesson during that time. Even as a kid, when you're poor, your family is poor. You won't have many friends at all. I was ashamed of where I lived. All my classmates lived in beautiful homes that looked rich and massive, and I didn't. At 13, I played a game called Star Wars: Knights of the Old Republic. I could get away from reality for so many hours, and I didn't have to think about the rejection of other kids, rejected crushes, etc. So I began to play video games to feel better about myself. But being isolated and felt like I didn't belong, it was the only thing that made me feel less worthless. So I finally entered high school, and I thought it was a good idea to be a part of a sport. That way, I could make friends and feel so good that I was a part of a group of hardworking people who had a goal to be unified. And I did make friends, one of which I'm still friends with today. As the high school years went by, I started to finally break through and create valuable friendships. Suddenly, I wasn't weird. I was that football kid who had purpose and value. But just as that was going on, things took a turn for the worst. My dad lost his job, and we had a new problem just after I completed high school. One of my brothers got seriously ill, an illness that kept him in and out of hospitals, and it broke the family. Another one of my brothers was absent and turned to alcohol to cope, and I had to deal with that while also attending college in town. More days came with little to no food, and it was terrible to see my parents struggle. Like, we literally only had rice to eat. The struggle was real. I had to figure out a way to help them financially, and I sorta did. So I got a job. I got fired after a month, but I got a job. My self-esteem dropped, and for a while, I was afraid to even work again because of the fear I had of not being good enough. I remember my boss called me a stigma, and all I did was go to work, do my job, and leave. So tough when you want to work to help your family and yourself, and life just didn't give you a break. I then found another job, and I thought this job could be different. Unfortunately, that was not the case. I was bullied there. I was considered the stupid worker. They called me names like slob, and one coworker, to my face, affectionately called me a piece of crap. During this time, I was never hostile, and I always treated them with respect, even if they didn't deserve it. After working there for a year, I decided I had enough and quit, but there was a glimmer of hope. I was a really passionate writer and author, and I wanted to get my published poetry out there. I was getting so much rejections, and it was just so much for me. But then, I ended up getting my first piece of poetry published, and it made me feel so good. It made me feel like I was going places. Funny thing was, towards the end of that job, I actually kind of rubbed it in the face of one of my coworkers who didn't think I was very smart. And I told him, I got published. I know, it was probably a petty thing to do at the time, but you gotta understand, I didn't like it there. Anyway, after working there for a year, I decided I had enough and quit. I wasn't coming back there. It wasn't worth it. I had more important things to worry about than adult children harassing me. Although, I do have to give thanks to a particular person who worked with me there. He was the only one who never thought those things, thought I was actually pretty cool. He said this to me: "You know, it's funny. All these people are talking about how you're slow and everything, and yet you're the only one in this job that actually comes to work professionally and does what they need to do, doesn't start any drama, and yet you're the problem. Interesting." Of course, that was right after he showed me a bottle of whiskey he had hidden in his shirt, but I'd like to believe that he actually said that with sentimental value and really genuinely cared. So I left, and I found a girl. We started going out, and I moved to a city 3 hours from where I lived. For some reason, I thought it would work out, and we would be together forever. Turns out, she was very controlling, told me I was worthless, I was weird, nobody could like me, so that's why she was controlling. So I got up, left the apartment, went back to my hometown, and that's when I began to rebuild my life. I said I'm sick of not having a stable job. I'm sick of my family having issues. I just want to get myself into a better situation. I got another job, and in the midst, I created this YouTube channel, and this has become my job. I'm definitely not making anything at all, not even really that much, but it has kept my spirits up. It has really changed my whole outlook on life, and in a way, it has saved me. The ability to connect with people on a personal level and have them appreciate what I want to do is amazing. Because of YouTube, I've established some great friendships and met a lot of great people along the way, and I have an audience. This channel is basically still a labor of love. It's not really making more than 1,000, a lot less than that to be exact. But that's not the point. The point is, this channel has given me virtually everything, and I'm very appreciative for it. I've had some highs and lows, and even if this doesn't become a career, I can confidently say that I built a community of supporters who are along with the journey every step of the way. So today, even though I haven't had the most adversity in the world, and people have been in much dire straits than I have, I'm always trying to be as respectful to people and always treating them with the respect that they deserve, even if they don't give it back to me sometimes. But hey, that's just who I am. I genuinely care for people and want to see them happy and succeed. I guess I'm empathetic in that way, because I don't want anybody to treat me awfully either. Think about it. In this life, you have two options. You can either deal with adversity and be positive about other things, or you can be a complete dick. Me, I just want to live my life in peace. I want to be able to help people. And if my videos help, then I feel like I'm doing a good job. So that's that. I don't know how my future will turn out. I don't know what's in store for me in the future. But I will tell you this. I will always work as hard as I can to succeed. And I'll always try to make sure that the content I bring to you guys is always genuinely great. Because if I don't work hard, then this is all for nothing. You guys deserve it, and you guys deserve the interactions, everything. This is not my world. This is your world. This is YouTube, not MeTube. And with that, I'm going to go.